Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ilia Explores podcast. I'm Simon Head, and what an event we had this past weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada. UFC International Fight Week took over Sin City for the entirety of last week. I was fortunate enough to be over there to experience it live. Huge week of events. UFC Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu launched at the UFC Apex on the Wednesday night. We had a two-day expo, UFC X, where tens of thousands of UFC fans flocked to the Las Vegas Convention Center for meet and greets with some of their favorite UFC fighters. We met and spoke to UFC legends, Hall of Famers. We had the Hall of Fame ceremony on Thursday night and the red carpet over there as well. The Rock was in attendance, a host of UFC legends past and present, and then it all gave way to Saturday night at the T-Mobile Arena. UFC 317, an absolute barnstormer of a fight card. UFC International Fight Week in the years past, sometimes it feels almost like International Fight Week is cursed. I remember back UFC 200, we had the main event, I think, was changed twice in the space of a week or in the space of 2 weeks before it eventually ended up being Amanda Nunes defeating Miesha Tate for the women's bantamweight title. And that, of course, was the launch of the Lionesses' incredible run at the top of the UFC women's divisions. But prior to that, it was supposed to be John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. We had a midweek drug test failure for John Jones, or at least the announcement of it. And then that spiraled into some incredible scenes of just chaos during Las Vegas International Fight Week. That was back in 2016. 9 years on, this fight week, relatively smooth, I have to say. We had a lot going on during the week. We even had Canelo versus Crawford press conference going on in Las Vegas this past week. But it really was all about UFC 317. 2 title fights at the top of a loaded fight card, which, by the way, delivered. Sometimes you get these big events, there's a big build-up, and sometimes the fights don't always deliver, and you're picking highlights out of the card and going, wow, that was an amazing moment. That was an amazing moment. This fight card was outstanding. It really was. It was one of the best fight cards I've seen so far this year on the biggest weekend of mixed martial arts this year. Let's run you through those results from UFC 317 as we bring you the last word on UFC 317, Topuria versus Oliveira. All right, where else can we start but with the main event? The lightweight title, the vacant lightweight title, was on the line. Islam Makhachev had made the decision to move up from lightweight to welterweight, vacating his title in the process. Ilia Topuria had just vacated the featherweight title to do exactly the same thing, to move up to lightweight, and he was due to fight for the belt. We thought it was going to be against Islam, but Islam had later made the decision to move up to welterweight to challenge Jack Della Maddalena, which I'm sure will be officially announced at some point in the coming weeks. However, we needed a title fight for International Fight Week, and the number 2 ranked lightweight on the planet, the most dangerous, arguably, lightweight on the planet, and the man with more finishes than any other fighter in UFC history, Charles "Du Bronx" Oliveira, steps in, looking to win back the title. He never lost inside the cage in what was to be a huge fight for the division and a huge fight for Ilia Topuria. He predicted all week in very relaxed, matter-of-fact fashion that he would knock out Charles Oliveira inside the first round. Some people thought that was a little bit optimistic. Others, myself included, thought that was entirely possible. I was asked for my sort of predictions leading into that week, and that was my prediction, a first round KO for Ilia Topuria. But as fight week wore on, we then saw what looked like a victory party the night before the fight. We had Ilia Topuria standing up on a chair, addressing friends and family and all the rest of it, raising glass to toast their successes. He said at the time that it was to celebrate getting to fight night, and that the work is done, and as far as he was concerned, the title had already been won as such, because all of the work had been done, and he knew that having done all of that work, All he needed to do was go in there and execute on fight night. And that he absolutely did. Great performance from Ilia Topuria. Needed just 2 minutes and 27 seconds to knock Charles Oliveira out cold. This wasn't some TKO stoppage. We see Oliveira get beat by strikes before, and it tends to be a case of him getting rocked and then overwhelmed with strikes, and then it's a TKO finish. This was a clean, clinical, just a demolition job by Ilia Topuria. The fight started out, Oliveira, as predicted by Topuria, took the fight straight to him, stepped across the cage, and looked to really impose his size, reach, and as he hoped, power advantage over Ilia Topuria. Well, as it turned out, the power was all on Topuria's side, as we would find out later in the round. But Topuria did well to just stem that early rush from Charles Oliveira. The fight eventually ended up on the mat, and Topuria ended up on top. Looked like he was going to try and posture up, try and find some sort of submission or maybe land some strikes from the top. Oliveira snatches up a leg, looks to sort of lock up some sort of leg lock situation, whether it be a heel hook or whatever. But Topuria, in a small amount of danger at that point, reacted well, stayed calm, made sure that he stayed out of trouble, and eventually got himself out of that position. The fight then returned to the feet, and once the fight returned to the feet, Topuria planted his feet, loaded up, and got the job done. An absolutely vicious two-punch combo. Both punches landed clean. The first one knocked him out. The second one just helped him down to the mat. And then a follow-up shot on the ground as he just got one more in before Mark Goddard could dive in and separate the pair. But that was a stunningly good performance from Ilia Topuria. And you take a look at his 3-fight run, he knocks out Alexander Volkanovski, he knocks out Max Holloway, and then he knocks out Charles Oliveira. That has to be up there with one of the most devastating runs of form at the very top level of mixed martial arts that we've seen. Certainly in the UFC, you might be able to pick a 3-fight run for Fedor during his prime Pride days. But if we're talking very modern era of mixed martial arts, Ilia Topuria's 3-fight streak that he's on right now, that's untouchable. Like, I don't think anyone's had 3 wins of that caliber against that level of opponent with that type of decisive, clean knockout finish anywhere else in the sport. I think that has been, that elevates him up the pound for pound list. For me personally, he is the #1 pound for pound fighter in the sport right now. Recency bias, maybe. Islam Makhachev has a hell of a resume and has done it consistently. But if we're looking at the, pound for pound tends to be more of a recent thing. You don't necessarily look back a huge amount of time. I mean, this is the thing with pound for pound, right? Everybody has different criteria. I was talking to my friend John Morgan about this. He submits his rankings every week, and trying to work out how you sort of calculate pound for pound rankings is very subjective. When it's divisional and you're talking about the rankings in the lightweight division or the rankings in the welterweight division or whatever it might be, you're comparing like for like. These are all fighters competing at the same weight class and oftentimes against similar levels of opponents. You can kind of judge, and it allows you to say, okay, this fighter's beaten a high caliber of opponent, or they beat them in more impressive fashion, and then you can do your list accordingly, right? With pound for pound, all that goes out the window. It's basically however you decide to judge it. The way I see this, and let's take pound for pound out of it if you like, skill for skill, just pure MMA ability, I think Ilia Topuria is the most talented mixed martial arts fighter in the world today. And the way that he's gone about his job and the way he's put these 3 guys away, as I say, Alexander Volkanovski, one of the toughest cookies in the UFC, long-time featherweight champion. He then puts away Max Holloway, never been knocked out in his career, barely been rocked in his career. He puts him out as well. And then Charles Oliveira, who, he's lost some fights over the course of his career for sure, but as a lightweight, he's one of the most dangerous men in the UFC. And I don't think anybody has put Charles Oliveira away as decisively and in such a scary fashion as Ilia Topuria did on Saturday night at T-Mobile Arena. That was super impressive. Ilia is now undoubtedly one of the UFC's biggest stars. And I think we're going to see them lean on that a little bit more now. I think he's fully established. And here's the thing, like, determine who's a star and who isn't a star. It's about eyeballs and who's watching your fights and how good you are inside the cage. It's that sort of blend of all of these things put together. And Ilia is certainly in Spain. He's already a superstar in Spain. He's probably one grade down from a superstar everywhere else. I'd say he's a star. He's certainly someone who people who know MMA know that Ilia Topuria is the real deal now. There are no question marks about whether this guy is actually any good or not. Is he going to be, quote, as the kids say, fraud checked? No, he's been in there with the best of the best and he's put them away. So there are no more doubts, as if there were any leading into this fight, about Ilia El Matador Topuria. What happens next is the big question now. He has three main options on the table, at least so it would seem. Number one is a fight with Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is a divisional staple. He's been around for ages. He's always been in and around the top 5 of the UFC lightweight division. He's incredibly dangerous. He's got great defensive wrestling. He's got nasty leg kicks. He's got knockout power, and he's got that ability to stand in the pocket and take punishment and dish it back with interest. The fact that he got flatlined in the way that he did by Max Holloway was an enormous shock. The fact that it happened and the fact that it happened in the way it did, that will give Topuria immense confidence that he could do that again. He can knock him out again. We've seen Gaethje's chin compromised now. Can Topuria do that again? He will think absolutely he can. That's one option. And Gaethje's got the tenure in the UFC, right? And I don't know whether this is posturing or just doing what he can to try and get himself a title fight. He has said if he doesn't get a title fight in his next fight, or it's been suggested that if he doesn't get a title fight in his next fight, he might be done. He might retire. So we will see what happens with that. Also in line is Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan actually weighed in as a backup fighter, or was in Vegas as a backup fighter this weekend for UFC 317. Of course, was due to face Islam Makhachev earlier this year. Withdrew from that fight on weigh-in day. There were some sort of medical complications that meant that he couldn't even get to the scale. Was forced out of that fight, which meant that Renato Moicano stepped in on a day's notice to fight for the title. And more of whom in a bit, actually. But Arman Tsarukyan, I think he needed to build a few bridges after that sort of last minute sort of pull out. Came in as the backup fighter this week. Talent-wise, there's no arguing the man's credentials, right? He should be there or thereabouts for a title fight in the UFC lightweight division. Possibly not the most attractive option in terms of pay-per-view buyers, but if you're talking pure meritocracy and ability and someone who could cause Topuria some real problems, Tsarukyan presents a very different kind of test. And I think would be a fight that we absolutely will need to see at some point if Topuria's reign continues. Will it be next? My gut tells me it probably won't be, but we shall see what happens on that front. And then the third name, and the name that I think was on everybody's lips leaving T-Mobile Arena on Saturday night, Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. Paddy was in Vegas all week. I got to chat to him for UFC Magazine earlier this week at UFC X. And we were talking about when he might get that shot, whether he might get the next one, whether he might have to fight again. He's fine either way. He'll take on whoever he needs to face to get his title fight. But what he is very convinced that he has the antidote to Ilia Topuria, and he thinks he'll not just beat him, he thinks he'll finish him. So, and they've got that bad blood. They really do not get along. There is a big rivalry between the two of them. They both acknowledge that. They both acknowledge that they don't like each other. This seems like a fight that is destined to happen. The question is, do they pull the trigger and book it for the next one? I hope they do, because we've seen in the past where things don't always line up the way you want them to in mixed martial arts, and fights that look like they're building their way up to a point where you can make it. And then you think, oh, we'll just do one more. And then something happens. Someone will lose unexpectedly, or someone else will suddenly stake a claim and supersede it. So what I would do is I would strike where the iron is hot. I would do it right now. I would get them both signed, book it for later in the year. There is a pay-per-view in Vegas in October. There is a pay-per-view almost certainly in New York in November. And there will probably be another pay-per-view in Vegas in December. So that would be they would be the most likely landing spots. Now, there's been lots of talk about could they do it in Spain. The UFC aren't yet set up to hold an event in Spain. They haven't managed to get that nailed down yet. I know there's work going on behind the scenes to try and make that happen. Topuria versus anybody in Spain would be massive. Topuria versus Paddy anywhere would also be massive. Topuria, I think, now is firmly established as the creme de la creme at 155 pounds. And the man who offers perhaps the most compelling challenge from a fan interest standpoint is definitely Paddy Pimblett, who he's been, as he said to me last week, the goalposts with him move all the time. People say, well, you're not going to beat this guy. He goes and beats that guy. Oh, but that guy was washed. You need to fight this guy next. So he goes and beats the next guy. Oh, no, he was too old, or he was in bad form, whatever it was. Whatever Paddy's been asked to do, he's gone out there and he's done it. And he had the Jared Gordon fight, which he always points out himself. That's a fight that was a real bit, wake-up call for him. That was a very close fight and a fight that many people thought he'd lost. He got the nod on that occasion. But since then, he has been outstanding. His win over King Green was incredible. Great performance. And his victory over Michael Chandler, I think, really cemented him as a legit contender. Michael Chandler is no mug. He's been in and around the top of the divisions ever since he's joined the UFC. He's challenged for the belt. Paddy is now 100% a contender. And I think because of the rivalry with Topuria, I think that is a no-brainer booking. I think you book it. I think you make it happen. You do it now. Because who knows? They might get to do it again further down the line. It's that big of a rivalry. And if Paddy were to spring a surprise, because he will be the betting underdog going into this fight, if he were to spring a surprise and beat Ilia Topuria, that would be absolutely huge. That would be absolutely huge and would only make the rematch even bigger. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it gets booked. They faced off in the cage. I think Joe Rogan kind of instigated that a little bit. Dana White in the press conference afterwards told us that had he been on the ground there, I think he was making his way around the arena at the time, so wasn't able to, wasn't aware that it was happening until it had happened. He did not like the idea of that face-off happening. I think that Ilia's wife and kids were in the cage, and he didn't want to run the risk of anybody getting hurt in case things spiraled out of control, because he knows that Ilia and Paddy do not get on. But all due respect to both guys, especially Paddy. Paddy could have gone in there and made a right old scene. He didn't. He just went in there. He congratulated Ilia on his performance, said that he thinks he's going to beat him. They exchanged a few words, and it was actually Ilia that gave Paddy a push. Paddy didn't respond, didn't look to escalate things, kept it as classy as possible, made sure that it didn't spiral out of control. No harm, no foul, right? All is well. And it sets the fight up. I know Dana wasn't a fan of the fact that the face-off happened. It did happen, and it just sets the stage perfectly. To book Gaethje or Sarukian now would feel like, I think it would feel like a disappointment. It would feel like the sort of consolation prize. The Paddy fight is the fight to make now. Would Paddy benefit from another fight and another win? Well, if he has another fight and wins it, then absolutely that would benefit him, and that would only serve to strengthen him even more going into a title fight. But I think when you have it there, the fighters are ready, they're both up for it, they're both positioned appropriately for the fight to be booked. It wouldn't be a wild swing or a gamble. It's not like they're pulling Paddy out of the, sort of the bottom of the rankings or anything. He's there or thereabouts at the top of the rankings. Book the fight. Let's see it later this year. But back to Ilia Topuria. Amazing performance. Absolutely perfect performance. And let's not forget, this was only his second fight in the UFC at 155 pounds. First one was against Jai Herbert. Amazing knockout. But he did get hurt early in that fight. And that was the little lingering doubt going in. That was Jai Herbert. If Jai Herbert can rock him, albeit with a great head kick, can Charles Oliveira do something? The man with the most finishes in UFC history. Oliveira couldn't do anything with him. And Ilia Topuria, I think, is just operating on a level above everybody else in the UFC right now. The only one who comes close right now is Islam Makhachev, who he's going to face some tests of his own now. I think he's moving into a division where he's no longer the biggest man in the division. He's going to be kind of average size for the welterweight division. And it's going to be a big step up. You know, it's not a 10-pound move. It's a 15-pound move, moving from lightweight to welterweight, 155 to 170. So it's a bigger jump than moving 45 to 55. So we'll see how that goes for him. I suspect he'll do very well. But that is going to be a challenge and a test for him, and I'm excited to see that. But right now, this is Ilia Topuria's world, and we're just all living in it and watching what he's getting up to. He was outstanding on Saturday night. We have a new, undisputed UFC lightweight champion of the world, and his name is El Matador, Ilia Topuria. All right, the main event was good. The co-main event was also outstanding. Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France. Again, a brilliant performance from Alexandre Pantoja, who looks like the class of the field at 125 pounds. Kara-France came in. There's a lot of talk about his finishing power. He'd picked up a great knockout win over Steve Erceg to earn his shot at the cannibal Alexandre Pantoja. But Pantoja is just too good everywhere. And this is the problem that he has. Everybody he's facing is excellent in one, maybe two areas of MMA. Pantoja's great in all of them. One of the most well-rounded champions we have in the UFC. He can wrestle, he can strike, he's got cardio for days, he's got submissions in the bag as well, and he's got good fight IQ. Like, he's got everything, and he's got one of the best teams in the sport, American Top Team, backing him up with just an incredible array of riches at his disposal in the training room, whether it be coaching, whether it be training partners, whatever it is. He has got everything in place to become one of the all-time greats. And in flyweight terms, he already is. You know, he's generationally brilliant already. The only one who his overall career has eclipsed Pantoja is Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. But Pantoja is gradually looking to chip away at some of those records. And yeah, that was a super impressive performance on Saturday. Submits Kai Kara-France in the third round in a fight that he completely dominated. You know, Kai's an elite fighter. He's so talented, but he barely got a look in this fight. That's how good Alexandre Pantoja's performance was. Just super impressive. You know, for him to do what he did on a stage like that, he won his title actually at International Fight Week. So he was more than happy to come back and defend it on familiar soil again. And he got the job done. I think that was his fourth title defense at 125 pounds. And it's incredible. It really is incredible. And the big question on the night was, who on earth can stop Alexandre Pantoja, because he's that good? Well, we now know the identity of the man who will attempt to be the next man to do exactly that, because that will be Joshua Van. Joshua Van took on number one contender Brandon Royval, stepped in on short notice to take on Raw Dog Royval, who was due to face Manel Kape in a number one contender fight at UFC 317. Kape had to pull out of the fight, unfortunately. Van, who'd only fought like 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, said, "I'm good to go, put me in." They booked him, he stepped in, and Joshua Van and Brandon Royval put on a Fight of the Year contender. For me, that is the Fight of the Year. That is the Fight of the Year so far. We've seen some crackers this year, but that, just the speed, the output, the back and forth, the narrative unfolding as the fight went on, and a young fighter who had never had that level of exposure before, had never fought at that level before, getting in there and delivering the goods like that on fight night was something really incredible. Super, super impressive performance from Joshua Van. He waited around at cage side. He asked to sit at cage side for the co-main event and asked to face off with the winner. And brilliantly, the UFC agreed with that, made it happen. We now have Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van for the flyweight title later this year. Has it come too early is the only question. You know, Van has, he's just flown up the ranks at an incredible rate. I think he was ranked like 14th or something going into the weekend. He just broke into the rankings with his last performance. Ends up facing the number one contender. Beats him deservedly. There's no controversy about that result whatsoever. 29-28 twice, 30-27 once. to win the fight by unanimous decision, and thoroughly deserves his opportunity to fight for the belt. But he has literally come out of nowhere. Brilliant performance from Joshua Van. And I'm super excited to see what he might be able to do with Alexandre Pantoja. The one thing I will say is that these performances we've seen from Joshua Van have come against people who wanted to stand and strike with him. Pantoja is going to want to wrestle the legs off him. So that's going to be the thing. Like in a stand-up fight, Joshua Van is capable of beating anybody in that flyweight division. I've seen that now. Royval is excellent on the feet. He's really good on the feet. He's got good boxing. He was working well behind his jab, even against Van, but Van was countering his head off. He really was. Like every time Royval was at range, he looked like he was doing well. But every time he stepped in to land something with a little bit more pepper on it, Joshua Van just hit him with a 2 or 3 punch combination, pow, 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 and then moved out of the way. And it was consistent, almost like clockwork every time. Every time Royval steps into range, pow, 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 bang, out he goes again. Brilliant performance of counter-striking by Joshua Van, and it turned into an absolute slugfest in the final round. Brilliant round of MMA. The first round was incredible as well, and it was one of those great fights to just sit back and enjoy. You know, you don't have to support either fighter. You know, both of them are guys that are very easy to get behind. Two really good guys in the 125-pound division. Fan-friendly, very open in their approach. And it was Joshua Van's day. What a performance from Joshua Van, who will now challenge for the undisputed UFC flyweight title his next fight. Incredible stuff. But yeah, he will be working his wrestling from now until fight night, because that's going to be the one thing that maybe we haven't seen that much of, but that's going to need to be on point, because if he can't stop Pantoja from taking him down, he's going to be in for a long night. But if he can prevent a takedown, then we could be in for an absolute cracker of a title fight later this year. But big performances from both men. Alexandre Pantoja retaining his title, 4th straight title defense. Joshua Van continuing his meteoric rise up the flyweight division. A brilliant win over the #1 contender, Brandon Royval. And now Van gets the shot at the undisputed flyweight title. All right, let's run you through the other 2 fights on the main card at UFC 317. Beneil Dariush took on Renato Moicano. This was a great matchup. We were supposed to have it earlier this year, but due to Arman Tsarukyan not being able to get to the scale to make weight to face Islam Makhachev, both of these guys were in line to potentially be drafted up the card to step in. Moicano got the nod. Benny Dariush didn't get to fight, but Renato Moicano was in there, fought for the belt, didn't go his way, taking on Makhachev on a day's notice. To say that's a tough task is putting it mildly. So they've rebooked Dariush and Moicano for UFC 317, and a fun build-up to fight night. Speaking to both of them at the media day, they're joking around about Moicano was saying how much older he thought Dariush was, and then suddenly he realized that he was only 15 days younger than Dariush, and they were kind of joking around, and Moicano saying there's only room for one old man to win this weekend, and it's going to be him. Dariush, who hadn't fought for a couple of years, due to, I think, injury, and then obviously a fight being pulled from under him when Moicano had to move up to take on Islam. He hadn't fought in a while. We haven't seen him in a while. And he's kind of the forgotten man of the division. He's super respectful, very thoughtful in his approach, but he's dangerous as hell everywhere. He's got heavy hands. He can knock you out with either hand. But on the mat, he's one of the very best grapplers in the UFC. He just is. He might not get the headlines like some other fighters in the division do. The lightweight division is packed with big characters, and Beneil Dariush is a little bit more reserved and likes to just keep it on the down low a little bit. But when he goes in there and fights, he puts on a show. He really does. He gives it everything he's got. And against Renato Moicano, he was the better fighter. As simple as that. He fought the better fight on Saturday night. He gets the unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Moicano, I think, maybe game plan or his approach on fight night, whether he stuck to his game plan or whether he went his own way, he grappled too much with Beneil Dariush. I think he fancied his chances with his own grappling against Dariush, but Dariush, I think, is just another level, and I think that put him at a disadvantage in key areas in that fight. And in the stand-up, I think Moicano, I think he said it himself in the lead-up to the fight. Moicano said he thought that he had better, sharper striking, but he also conceded that Beneil Dariush had the knockout power advantage. So what do, right? Do you go in there and trust your hands and sort of look to pick the guy apart over time, knowing that you're running the risk of getting caught by an absolute one-shot, one-hitter quitter from a guy who's flatlined people before? Or do you put your jiu-jitsu skills to the test against one of the very best grapplers in the division? So he was kind of in a tricky spot, Moicano, because the areas where the fight could be finished, Dariush had the edge in both. The way that Moicano was most likely to finish that fight was if he was able to get Dariush uncomfortable on the feet, maybe sting him with something, rock him a little bit, get on top in a dominant position, and then finish him with strikes from top position. But that's a very specific route to victory. And when that really didn't present itself, it meant that the fight was very much in Beneil Dariush's advantage. That's how it panned out on fight night. 29-28 across the board. I know Moicano will be very disappointed with that. It was a good, close, competitive fight between two really good lightweights. Beneil Dariush made clear he wants the title. Unfortunately for him, he is sort of not at the front of the queue, it's fair to say. There are probably at least 3 people ahead of him. So that means he's going to have to fight again. And it's probably going to have to be against one of those 3 guys, whether it be Paddy, whether it be Arman, or Justin Gaethje. So my sneaking suspicion is that we might see Beneil Dariush versus Arman Tsarukyan later this year in a fight night main event, or maybe in a co-main event somewhere. I think we need to see those 2 probably win one more to get them into position. A 5-round contender fight would make most sense for both of those guys, I think. So we'll see how that all pans out. I mean, that Arman may still get the title shot, but my gut feeling says he won't. And if he isn't, he needs a fight. And I think the most relevant fight, because he needs to fight someone who's highly ranked as well to maintain his position at the top end of the division. Beneil Dariush deserves to fight someone at the top end of the division. I think that's an easy booking in terms of the way it makes sense. So we'll see. We will see how that all pans out. But that was a big win for Beneil Dariush. As I say, been away for a while, and he was, a bit emotional, and justifiably so after picking up a win. But again, one of the sport's real nice guys, and it's hard to begrudge someone like that when they pick up an important win. So big win for Beneil Dariush. That's for Renato Moicano. Always entertaining, always great to talk to on media days and stuff like that. One of the biggest, most entertaining characters in that UFC lightweight division. I'm sure he will bounce back again, and there will be entertaining fights for him down the line. And who knows, two big wins, he's back in the mix again as well. So we'll see how that pans out for him in the coming months. Their fight was the second one on the main card. The very first fight of the main card was a bantamweight bout between Peyton Talbot and Felipe Lima. I was really high on Felipe Lima coming into this fight. It was his 3rd fight in the UFC. The first 2 came at featherweight, which is not his natural weight class. Bantamweight is his natural weight class. And I thought, fighting a bantamweight, we're going to see the best of Felipe Lima. And Peyton Talbot had been exposed a little bit for some of his ground fighting abilities, whether it be in the scrambles or it be dealing with sort of top control or whatever it might be. But he got bossed a little bit in his previous fight, and he really was hurt by how he lost last time out, and was determined to sort of bounce back. And I thought Lima might be a really difficult proposition for him. But Talbot produced a brilliant performance. He really did, because to understand how good Peyton Talbot was at UFC 317, you need to understand how good Felipe Lima is. Felipe Lima is brilliant. He's seriously talented, and at bantamweight, I think he can be a contender. I genuinely think he can be a contender. And one of the things that makes Lima so good is how he fights in the scrambles. He's got good striking, he's got good grappling, but the thing that he does that few other fighters do is he wins in the scrambles, and he wins almost all the time in the scrambles. He's the one who, if they're sort of tussling on the mat, he's the one who does something explosive, gets himself into a better position. When he's the one who's in a disadvantageous position, he's the one who manages to get to do something to escape and to turn the tables, whether it's a sweep or just escaping a difficult position. His ability, he's just a pain in the backside for whoever he's fighting, because he's just perpetual motion. He never stands still. He's always doing something positive, whether he's throwing strikes at you, whether he's looking to take you down, whether he's looking to advance position on you on the mat. Whatever it is, Felipe Lima can do that and does that very, very well. But against Peyton Talbot, he was up against someone who had clearly advanced his game several levels on the ground. Like, we know Peyton can stand and strike, and he did so successfully on fight night. But it was on the mat that the fight was won, and it was because Talbot was able to match Lima's energy in the scrambles and come out on the upside of many of them. And I was super impressed. I honestly thought Felipe Lima was going to win that fight on Saturday night. I just thought he'd be a little bit too much, a little bit too relentless, and because he just keeps going back to it. If he tries something, it doesn't work out. He doesn't sort of sit back and reset and work out what he wants to do. He's just straight into something else. As I say, he's relentless. He's a pain in the rear end for whoever he fights. Peyton Talbot dealt with that and dealt with it brilliantly and got a deserved win on the scorecards. 29-28 across the board. Really, really impressive. I think both of these guys are going to be future contenders at 135 pounds. They're both early in their careers. They're both super talented. And it was slightly surprising to see them match this early in their careers. I don't think that loss is going to hurt Lima too much. I really don't, because it was a good competitive fight. Talbot was just a little bit better on the day. Great performance from him. Deserves all of the credit that he's getting for the way he elevated his game. As for Lima, it's his first defeat in the UFC. He was 2-0 heading into this one. Loses this one, he'll want to get back in there as soon as possible. So I would imagine we'll see him October, November time, if not before, looking to bounce back and get himself back on the horse again. So, but yeah, great fight to kick off that main card. Even though we had 3 decisions opening up that main card at UFC 317, the event shone. The main card was excellent. It was a great night at the T-Mobile Arena, and that main card really was top draw stuff. Thoroughly entertaining main card at UFC 317. All right, let's take a look at the preliminary card results as we wrap up the final results at UFC 317. One of the scariest knockouts of the year in the featured prelim. Middleweight fight, Gregory Rodriguez versus Jack Hermansson. Huge left hook KO in the first round, late in the first round from Gregory Rodriguez. Nasty follow-up shot that, to be honest, was not needed. I don't know why Rodriguez felt he needed to do it, because Hermansson was absolutely, he wasn't just out, he was out. He was completely unconscious. Rodriguez just kind of strolled up and landed a nasty additional shot. Have to be question marks over what Herb Dean was doing. He needed to be physically in between those two fighters. The way Hermansson went down, there was no doubt that he was unconscious. And he was just slow getting in there. And it's, that extra shot was a big damaging one. And, those are the sort of shots that we don't want to see in mixed martial arts. And Herb is a good, experienced referee. But if there is a criticism that is consistently leveled at him, is that he can be a little bit too laissez-faire, a little bit too passive, he doesn't always jump in as aggressively as MMA referees sometimes need to do to make sure that unnecessary additional punishment is not dished out. So Hermansson was out for a good few minutes, and it was a scary time at cage side as people were attending to him to make sure he was okay. Thankfully, he eventually was able to get up and leave under his own power, and was checked out by medics at the arena and allowed to go home, or go back to his hotel rather than go on to the hospital. So that was good news. But it was a very, very scary knockout. Now, Gregory Rodriguez That's a huge win for him. A really big win for him. He wants to make his way up that middleweight ladder. I think he's won 4 of his last 5 now. That was a big, big win for him against a respected, seasoned veteran who has been in and around that sort of top 10 in the UFC middleweight division for quite some time. So big win for Gregory Rodriguez. Obviously, that won a performance of the night bonus. That was huge. Like Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria picked up the 2 performance of the night bonuses. The fight of the night, absolutely no question, was the flyweight contender fight between Brandon Royval and Joshua Van. They both got 50 Gs each as well. Looking at the rest of the prelims, Jose Delgado defeats Haider Emil. First round knockout, 26 seconds. Haider Emil came into the fight with a reputation as being a bit of a berserker, and but Delgado just absolutely crushed him with a knee, just straight out the middle, right on the chin, and that's all she wrote. Obviously, follow up shots as the referee dived in, but Haider Emil, who was on a good run of, he had a fair amount of hype behind him going into this fight. Jose Delgado took all of that with a really impressive win, 26 seconds, and he can consider himself a little bit unlucky not to get a bonus or not to get one of the official bonuses. I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC chucked a few extra bucks his way. That was a big, impressive performance from Jose Delgado. Someone else who put in a big performance was Tracy Cortez. That was super impressive against Viviane Araújo, who's been a staple of the women's flyweight rankings for quite some time now. Maybe not quite championship level, but in those sort of gateway positions between sort of 5 and 10. And Tracy put on, I think, possibly the best performance, certainly the best performance I've seen from her in the UFC. Dominated the fight, 30-27s across the board. Really, really good win for her. And it'd be interesting to see how she's booked next, to see just how the UFC looks to position her moving forward. Can they get her on that Noche card, I wonder? That would be a good fit. If they could get Tracy Cortez on that Noche UFC card, which is going to be in San Antonio, Texas, I think September the 15th, is it? September the 15th? Let me just quickly check my calendar while I'm here. September the 15th, not September 15th, sorry, September the 13th. There we go. September 15th, a Monday. We don't do UFC fights on a Monday. September the 13th, UFC San Antonio, which will be Noche UFC. Same day as Canelo Crawford, which we saw lots of promotional stuff for that during International Fight Week as well. But yeah, Tracy Cortez will be a great fit, assuming that all's well. She's not too banged up after that fight. She won it decisively. Long as she hasn't done any lasting damage to herself that's going to need extra time to heal up, she could potentially make a relatively quick turnaround to fight at Noche. But we'll see. We'll see how that one goes. That was a big, impressive victory for Tracy Cortez. Really important win for her. Terence McKinney versus Vyacheslav Borshtev. We knew this fight was going to be wild. We knew it probably wasn't going to last very long, and it was both of those things. Borshtev went straight in there looking to trade. Now, Terence McKinney is more than happy to throw hands with people and knock them out, but he has been clipped and finished quickly himself. Used a bit of smart fight IQ, used Borshev's aggression against him, ducked under, big takedown, works into dominant position, locks up guillotine choke, bish bash bosh, 55 seconds, submission victory. Great performance from Terence McKinney. Another one like Jose Delgado earlier, who on another night would be walking around with a 50G bonus for that performance. It's just that this fight card was so full of great performances that he didn't get one of those official bonuses at the end of fight night. But again, hopefully the UFC looked after him and chucked a few extra quid his way. But great performance from Terence McKinney, who is always must-see TV. He's definitely not someone to, when Terence McKinney fights, don't go for a pee break, because by the time you get back, the fight's over. Whether he's won or lost, the fight tends to be over. So T-Rex getting the job done on Saturday night in the first TV prelim of the night. Leading into that, we had the 2 Fight Pass prelims. Jacoby Smith against Nico Price. That was a real battle for Jacoby Smith against Nico Price, who gave him plenty to deal with. But Jacoby's got, I know people are high on him, and he's got big potential in that welterweight division. Showed us a little bit more of that on Saturday. Gets the rear naked choke finish late in the second round. And kicking things off, Jonata Diniz getting the unanimous decision win against Alvin Hines, who stepped in on short notice to make his UFC debut and acquitted himself pretty well, I thought. But Diniz was just a little bit better across the 3 rounds, 29-28 across the board for Diniz, who gets the victory in the opening bout of the night. Bonuses, as I mentioned earlier, fight of the night, Josh Van versus Brandon Royval. Obviously, that was going to win fight of the night. That is probably the fight of the year so far. Performance of the night, Ilia Topuria for his title-winning knockout against Charles Oliveira, and Gregory Rodriguez for that terrifying one-shot knockout of Jack Hermansson. That was UFC 317. Great night of fights, great week over in Vegas. It was great to see so many people over there. Great to chat to a load of fighters and just to get a sense of everything. I even managed to catch the Tough Enough event on the Sunday in Vegas before heading off home. I'm not going to lie to you, I am fighting off some major jet lag while I do this podcast. So yesterday was a complete non-starter for me. So hopefully I'm semi-coherent on the podcast this week. It was a great night of fights, really was. And we have a week off of UFC events at least this week. The PFL takes center stage this weekend. We have PFL Europe, I believe it is, in Brussels, Belgium on Saturday. Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts, someone whose career I've followed for many years, has joined the PFL. He headlines against undefeated Belgian superstar Patrick Habirora. That will be a great fight. Habirora, a lot of people are very, very high on him. He's a very dangerous man. And against Danny Roberts, he's going to go in there against one of the most seasoned fighters in Europe at 170 pounds. He's been in there on the big stage in the UFC and has only just recently departed the promotion. It was great to see that he had signed with the PFL. Really looking forward to seeing how he gets on in that main event. But it should be a good card. And what a great city to hold an event in, by the way. Brussels, Belgium. What's not to like, right? The Belgian beer, the beautiful architecture. It's not too far from the UK. Great pick by the PFL. Really looking forward to that this coming weekend. And then obviously the week after that, we're back on full circulation. We've got Cage Warriors 192 from the Indigo in London. And we've got UFC Fight Night in Nashville, Tennessee. Derek Lewis versus Taliesin Teixeira in what should be an absolute banger of a heavyweight headliner down there in Tennessee. Brave Combat Federation head to Bulgaria for a fight card in Burgas as well. So lots going on next week. This coming weekend, get tuned into the PFL on the Zone. That will be well worth watching. Nice big card. Afternoon viewing. The weather's nice. Just get some cold beers in the fridge. Get some cold drinks in the fridge. Get the fan set up in the living room. Tell the kids to go play on a games console or go down the park or something like the olden days, and park yourself in front of the telly for some Saturday night fights this coming weekend. PFL Europe Brussels. It should be a good one. But thanks for checking out the RDX Sports podcast this week from a very tired and somewhat jet-lagged Simon Head. Follow us on the socials at RDX Sports on X, at RDX_sports on Instagram and Threads, and you can follow me across all social platforms at Simon Head Sport. Thanks so much for checking out the show. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, all that good stuff, and enjoy the PFL Europe action this weekend. And I'll be back to talk to you next week.